And good afternoon, gaming intelligentsia, and welcome to the 15th episode of the iGaming Next podcast. Today, we have with us Sam Brown, CCO of Hero Gaming. It's really nice to see you, Sam. Really nice to have you with us. The topic today is 2020 innovation game changers. Big topic. So first of all, I'd love for you to introduce yourself, Sam. Who are you, and what's your background?
Sure. Likewise, great to be here. Thank you very much again for having me. So my name is Sam Brown. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Hero Gaming. We're an operator that run multiple brands on our own proprietary software. Been in the industry now since 2004, so too many years to count. Worked in some everywhere from sort of startups through to large listed entities, but found my home recently with Hero Gaming. So I've been there about 18 months now.
Yeah, so you've been in the iGaming industry for a long time as well, Sam. I mean, there's not that many other individuals that have stuck out this industry for that long. I would like to just ask you about that. Like, how did your journey start? And back in the days, like, can you compare the industry to what it looks like today?
Yeah, so I mean, how I got into gaming was quite interesting, I guess. I studied economics and finance, and all I ever really wanted to do was to work in banking in the city. And then when I finally ended that degree and got myself in position to be there and started working with internships and stuff in banking, found it utterly boring, actually, as an industry. Had this sort of young and early moment of clarity where I thought, how do I bring together a few more of the things that I'm actually really passionate about? And I was working with a very talented recruiter at the time who managed to get me into the gambling industry in Ladbrokes. You've got to remember, back then, online gaming was just starting, and really Ladbrokes was this huge retail conglomerate business. So you always felt like a really, really small fish in a massive ocean. I was lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time when online gaming started. I'm very thankful for that. And since then, the industry's it's unrecognizable from my perspective, obviously, because back then there were a number of small but enormous institutions, and obviously since then innovation has happened. Whole new areas of the industry have arisen, different services and all the peripherals that happen around gaming have grown and succeeded. And then there's been lots of different market entries, and for me, I've been lucky enough to work with different international companies with different management teams from different countries with very different ways of doing business. And if I look at where I find myself today, in a sort of a senior role in a really successful and really fun medium-sized company, I mean, it couldn't feel any different, to be honest, to those early points. So that's my sort of personal journey, I would say. And then, when it comes to what does the industry look like, I mean, obviously now with the sort of prevalence of online, and with rafts of new regulation and new markets and new products, and it looks totally different. Although, that's not to say that those traditional areas are not still succeeding. We know, of course, that bookies still do really well up until very recently, at least, anyway, in the UK. So it's gambling will always be around in its form, but perhaps as generations change, you can see now how the businesses are evolving around that.
Yeah, it's good points, and it's an interesting journey to have been on since those days, 2003, 2004. I came across Ladbrokes actually, I think around 2003 the first time as well. Before I entered it, this was in the height of the poker boom in Sweden, and there
Exactly.
was the days of Douglas Roos and those guys at Ladbrokes. I remember he took over there, and Ladbrokes was like an institution almost in Sweden. But back then, when the poker boom happened, it was interesting times back then.
Yeah, we did a deal with some guys called Sponsio who were working in Scandinavia, I remember, and then we used to sit in very close proximity to the poker guys. I was working back then with the casino team, and they were arranging tournaments and hiring cruise ships, and it was a very weird but exciting world.
Yeah, exactly. And it's something you discussed previously on this podcast. Like during that era, let's say 2003 to, I would say, up until around Black Friday in the US. What was that, like 2008 or something? It was gambling at that time was very socially accepted, at least in Scandinavia, because of the poker boom, which kind of entered every house almost in Sweden and Scandinavia at large. And during that time, it was like a quite interesting push to legalize gambling to a certain extent during that time. And it's something we discussed in the podcast before, that this stigma that we are seeing now with gambling didn't really exist in the 2000s to that extent because of poker.
Yeah, I think poker and bingo did a lot for the social sort of acceptance, or just creating verticals that that people found socially acceptable. But you've got to remember that there's always been scratch cards, there's always been national lotteries, there's always been what the public perceive as socially acceptable forms of gambling. I think now the problem that the governments see is they see a huge growth in casino, online casino, and also to an extent sports betting, and this is what they would interpret to be bad gambling. So I mean, it's interesting what societies draw on different things. I mean, certainly you can see from Swedish regulation that casino is the root of all evil, but if you were in the UK, again, it's still very socially acceptable to play casino. It's very socially acceptable to bet on sport. It's a very common hobby. Most of the friends I know will at least have one sort of fun football bet at the weekends while they're watching the game in the pub or something. So it's frustrating to see how some of the new social sort of stigmas are around it, but at the same time you can understand it when there's a media that's against it, or perhaps certain politicians that want to make an agenda around it. It's usually the root cause of this type of sentiment.
Yeah, of course, and I mean also the industry itself created a bit of a monster in terms of marketing and perception, perhaps when things started to become more about quick wins and quick withdrawals and these other things, and kind of started to get on people's nerve a bit. But I want to take a step back again into the topic of today. So 2020 innovation game changers that we're discussing. I think even this topic of stigma can tie into that topic, because perhaps we need more innovation in the way the industry approaches marketing and stuff like that as well, which can then also help to get rid of some of this stigma. But I want to start by asking you, Sam. I mean, you've been in industry for a long time. I mean, you know the industry inside out, and you have strong opinions in various areas. And obviously, innovation is an exciting area to be working on for you and so forth as the chief commercial officer at Hero Gaming. But I want to start by asking you, what's your all-time favorite innovation? And it doesn't have to be gaming.
Oh, all-time favorite innovation. It's gonna sound bad, but if I think, okay, the most recent I would say, all-time innovation for me was probably IPTV.
Okay.
So living in Malta with very limited access to TV channels and having to have 400 subscriptions for everything, to have one small box in my house which does all of those things at very low cost, for me as a sort of lifestyle innovation and convenience, I'd say that's the one that kind of has an impact on me, let's say, as a product.
It's a blessing and a curse.
It's a blessing and a curse, exactly.
It's the best innovation and the worst innovation at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. And it's of course there are many innovations now that you just kind of take for granted in your life, around the social media spaces. But WhatsApp was also one that I think just fundamentally changed the way I communicated with people, which must be a positive innovation in that sense. Being able to share rich media so freely and safely through those kind of platforms, and being able to organize golf events and social gatherings, or just share stupid pictures or opinions with one another. Again, these are for me fairly obvious, but really things that I think of innovations of things that kind of fundamentally change the normal things that I do in my life, rather than something that is SpaceX or something where it's amazing, but doesn't really affect me on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, no, I guess it's the things that just seems like they make sense. We take it for granted that we have WhatsApp, and we are sharing one of those groups, the Malta Golf Society group, which is quite active. So I share that excitement of innovation with you in that regard. So if we move into gaming in that sense, then what do you feel are the biggest innovations in recent years within the iGaming sphere?
Yes, I think, well, if we start with some obvious ones, so I think an area which continues to innovate probably at the fastest pace is the sort of payments area. Let's say the onboarding and payment solutions. I think that area of our industry in the last 2 or 3 years has developed massively and innovated at a really good pace. The first of those, of course, was the widespread use of the bank ID tools in Scandinavia, instant deposits, instant withdrawals, instant KYC, removing some of these really painful blockers to the customer and providing a much safer environment for both the player and the operator to manage individual accounts. So that for me is a wonderful innovation, I think, for both player and operator.
Can I ask you a question on that note? Because it's quite. I guess the first service that came in that note was Pay and Play by Presley, who incorporated that. And when they launched that product, it was met with a lot of skepticism within the industry. There was, I think, about a year before it was adopted. They signed exclusively agreements and stuff like that. But there was a lot of skepticism in the beginning. What was your reaction when the Pay and Play and your organization at that time, when Pay and Play was launched? What was your reasoning?
I mean, so it depends. For me, if I look at it from a commercial perspective, there was very few things that I'd been that excited about up until that point. Yes, there was a bit of a slow initial uptake on it, but I think that there's 2 points to this. I think the way it was sold, I had some skepticism around the way it was sold, telling customers that they don't have an account, that they're anonymous, and that they're this and that and the other. And in some cases that was true. Some operators were living by that guarantee to the customer. But of course you had an account. Of course there was an audit trail of you. So to lead customers to believe that there wasn't, that bit I was a bit skeptical of. But that sort of quickly went away, and then customers quickly understood that this was something that was hugely beneficial for them. This was a way that they could play without submitting marketing information, which is a huge benefit for people who don't like receiving 400 texts and 10,000 emails a week from gambling companies and sites. And, you know, just being able to know that one customer had one account meant that you could treat that customer with the respect that they were due when it came to looking after them with rewards and bonusing and so on. And you knew that you had a verified customer because a bank had done that KYC for you in a rigorous manner. And so from both sides, from a player protection perspective and from an operator operations perspective, for me, I was never skeptical about it. I always thought it was a wonderful innovation.
Fantastic. So yes, I interrupted you a little bit there in the recent other innovations. So you started with payments. So obviously Pay and Play, one recent innovation. Any other examples that you have?
Yeah, well, within the same area, you obviously had blockchain. So I think we're still not really, seeing the full effect of what will happen with blockchain. But there were a few companies that moved quickly, set up sort of, let's say, well, they weren't even RNGs, but they were the equivalent of RNGs using blockchain technology. Again, we haven't seen those rise to prevalence yet, but you know, as people become less trustworthy, perhaps, of those types of things in the future, it's a great innovation, a great technology to fall back on. But even if you think of it in even simpler sense, which is smart contracts, you know, and we haven't seen this applied yet, but I can almost guarantee that we will do in a very short period of time. You know, imagine being an affiliate or a supplier and being able to essentially instantly settle your position with an operator using smart contracts. That again could really fundamentally change how cash flow moves and works, and it could make cash flow work a lot harder for certain smaller businesses. So I think there's definitely some innovations that blockchain has allowed to happen, which we haven't quite seen yet, but they will appear, and I think probably more imminently than perhaps we thought.
For the people like myself who only have a vague idea of what smart contracts are, for example, I just know that it's a good replacement for normal contracts that can disintegrate after X amount of time. Can you explain a little bit what a smart contract is and how it's using the blockchain technology?
So essentially, if you boil blockchain down to its absolute basics, it's a public ledger of transactions, which are then digitally kind of encrypted, broken down, and split across a network, and then put back together to re-encrypt them. But if you forget the encryption part of it, essentially what you've got is a highly a visible transaction history that is available to a buyer, a seller, and a middleman. So if I'm an affiliate and I send traffic to a casino, I can immediately see what's happening on that casino, and I can then, if I wish to, create such a billing where I immediately want to be billed for that transaction. So if I saw that a player had just played and lost 100 euros and I have 25 revenue share, essentially the technology could deliver me that 25 immediately. So of course, you know, this is not the most obvious application of it, because you know, if you tried to settle affiliate contracts at every single bet, it would probably become cumbersome. But the point is, you could settle on a daily basis or a weekly basis, or you could just use it for having absolute visibility, so nobody feels like they're not getting the data, they're not missing the links, they're not missing the player information, the transactions. So it essentially, it keeps everyone honest. Is a simple way to describe it, and
there would be no way for the operator to go behind the back of an affiliate, for example, or
exactly. So it keeps everyone honest, and it keeps things straightforward. And you can imagine that, you know, I don't think it's too long before we'll start to see turnover-based deals being done with affiliates using smart contracts. Like, I think that's a natural progression of the way that those type of areas of the industry work. So it could be interesting.
Yeah, so the technology is already there, right? Like,
Yes.
do you see any reason why it's not being implemented so far, or has it been implemented but on a lower scale?
I think it has been. I think it has been implemented and applied just in other industries first. So of course, it's a big world out there, and we sometimes forget that we're a very small niche part of it. So if you're applying a new technology, it's not, gaming's probably not your first port of call. There are a huge queue in front of gaming of industries and applications of this type of technology where I think it can be better, or let's say monetized in a quicker way. So I think we'll get there over time. I think it's a technology that makes sense in our industry, but yeah, maybe there's someone out there developing it. I don't know, but it's certainly an interesting. I don't think we're too far away from that as an innovation.
Interesting. And so we have innovation in payments, innovation in blockchain technology recently. Any other innovations you would say in the recent years that has been meaningful for the iGaming industry before we start looking forward?
Yeah, I mean, I like this the idea of licensing the game mathematics. So you saw, I don't know if you guys have spent much time talking to Nick Robinson, but him and the guys at Big Time Gaming, they've always been right on the cutting edge of new technologies. They've been kind of disruptors, and the idea of creating this megaways maths, which could then be readily applied to new games and even retrofitted onto old games and sold in that way to create a new revenue stream. I think that's really innovative. Like that for me is such a smart move, and a couple of other suppliers have followed suit and created other licensed mechanics. I think the Infinity Reels was one by Real Play, and I'm sure we'll see more of those type of kind of developments on the supplier side, which make a lot of sense. A bit like when side bets were sold into table games by suppliers. It's this one I think is really cool, and with something like Megaways, what you saw was rapid acceptance of technology or of that innovation. It spread like wildfire. Like it went crazy from the second or third application, and now every man and his dog seems to have a Megaways. So it's really it's nice to see that when we find, as an industry, when we find something we believe in, the speed at which it gets executed and brought to market is still phenomenal to me. The same with Bank ID. The speed at which Bank ID just became so normal in the casino space was, a short period of time, if you were to compare that to other industries.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it from a bit more philosophical point of view, I mean, in the industry that we are in, it's a gambling industry. We are taking care of people's bets and gaming and so forth. And when there is an innovation that makes sense, so to say, there can't be any feelings or things like this involved in this industry because of the nature of the industry itself. And I think that plays a big part in the adoption of new technologies, just based on the nature of the industry itself, I think. But if we look now then at innovations ahead of us, let's say, what would you say are some of the more exciting trends that you see at the moment? And there is a lot of novelty that we see at the same time. Like, how do you distinguish between the novelty and the trends that will actually stick around? Let's say, what would be your predictions?
So I think what I think is exciting, it's not really that new anymore, but I think the application of it is becoming more innovative, is the streamers. We talk about the social stigma and how do we counteract negative social stigmas. Well, one great way to do that is to engage the public in gameplay, much like is done on in other industries, and allow players to experience and enjoy their hobby without even perhaps playing. They can just sit and watch people and follow individuals and create communities or talk and chat about games and releases. So I think that's a really interesting innovation. And I also think that, as a platform, you've already seen, the most natural application of it was that brands would use it to promote themselves, much in the same way they do with affiliates. But what you've seen much more recently, if you look at companies, companies who've been really successful in this area, like casino grounds, they're doing fantastic work now, working with the suppliers themselves.
Yeah, direct.
To use their platform as a way to introduce new products or to help explain products and market release products. And that is a really interesting innovation for me. And I think that as a platform, it is definitely around to stay. And I think that the streaming will become a lot more popular. It will become a lot more mainstream. It already sort of is. And then I think that, what's the next natural progression? I mean, could you privately stream amongst friends? Can that become, the technology's there, but people don't really use it. But could a bunch of friends play slots together, or, place bets together with some sort of jointly editable bet slip using video technology or streaming technology to play together and enjoy the gambling products together? And I think that when I think of the future, I think probably more, I don't really think specifically about products. I think more about what are humans doing more and more? What are the behaviors looking more like in 2020? And you can definitely see a trend of, people wanting to play together, people wanting to share gambling experiences. So I think that there's some really, easy ways that we could use the technology we have to make gambling together and playing together much more. So
aren't SuperNation just launching a product which is very much on what you're talking about now? I can't remember the name of it, but it's like a co-op game. You play 1 versus 1, and it's like a battle. Have you seen this?
It's like a sort of battle, a battle game, and I think that that's a really interesting interpretation of the technology. But you could also use it. I think what's more prevalent, certainly if I think about the way that I would tend to interact with gambling products, will be that my friends and I would put on an accumulator on the football together. At the moment, one person has to do that. One person has to manage the flow. That person has to cash in, cash out, and then use something like Revolut or Wirex or some other fund transfer mechanism to move the funds to the other players in the group. But the technology's there. Okay, there may be some regulatory restrictions that you'd have to get around, but why couldn't someone build that technology to come together to allow my friends and I to place that bet under one platform, and maybe even sit and stream and watch it together and see how our bets are doing? Could we do the same while we're playing slots? Could we do the same while we're watching esports, if that's your thing, right? So I just think that the tech is there. Yeah. But the innovation hasn't really happened yet with the tech. I think we're still all trying to get to grips with how do we use that in a way where we are both compliant and compelling in the same way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that is the as you're mentioning, the technology is there. It's maybe the industry is just waiting for the first ones to create this product, basically. So for anyone who is listening now, here is a great idea from Sam Brown. But I hope you get some creds for that when the product launches in a couple of weeks.
Exactly.
Yeah. Brilliant. And what about if we take in like more future-driven, kind of hyped technology in general right now, which is like on the AI field, and do you think that AI will play a bigger part in gaming as well? Same thing there. AI is quite hyped in general at the moment, quite overhyped in some regard. so people like to throw around the expression because it seems to be the future in many ways. But do you see that in Hero Gaming, how you guys operate AI tools? How do you see the future?
Yeah, well, I mean, we already operate technology like chatbots and machine learning with our insight and analytics. So at the levels where you got to remember, it's about data. You need to have you need to have a lot of data points to create the artificial ones and to use it effectively. So yeah, I think where I see quite a bit of progress of sort of where the most obvious progress would be perhaps with artificial intelligence. I think you also have some really good technologies like Fast Track where they're trying to use player behaviors to model what the front end experiences should be. So not just triggering CRM campaigns and SMSs, but how should we adapt the site? How should we adapt the flows, the UX? What the front end of the website? What should it do based on individuals? And again, that's a really smart use of that type of technology. But again, it's not very well defined as to what it actually is. That's probably my own sort of definition of what it is, which is a machine doing the smart jobs for you. And I think we already have some good examples at Hero of those technologies being applied.
And obviously, the fast track example that you mentioned is very similar to how Netflix operates their front end, which is very good at suggesting the next series you want to watch based on your history. But not only that, it also suggests to you the right thumbnail image, for example, or the right type of preview in the video that it gives you is based on the data points that Netflix have gathered on you and the information they have based on what you have viewed previously. Their systems are very advanced in that regard.
Yeah, they look at how many times they need to show you something before you buy it, because that varies between people. Some people will buy it on the first sight. Some need to see it anywhere up to 10 to 15 times, they believe, before they buy. So there's some cool technologies there for sure. Those have been around a lot longer, I would say, outside of our industry. So I think that e-commerce in general has been a much more competitive market than gaming has been for many, many years. So a lot of those sort of web technologies and web learning and web analytics, a lot of those things are done far better in other industries, I would say, than they are in gaming. Whereas, we have had different challenges that we've kind of been fighting, and probably an area where our storefronts are probably the things that get most neglected in favor of, being able to get the right deals, get the right traffic, get the right games on site, have the right product mixes, have the right payment types, functionality, KYC in a swift and prompt and effective manner. So, we've things are much faster moving, obviously, if you're just selling products on a website, and so the skills they have there. But of course, all of those innovations can be translated to iGaming, and you do start to see more of those things coming through, the sort of more general e-commerce principles. And I think Scott will talk about some of those on Friday when he joins you at Fireside. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. The Power Hour. He's Scott Dodson, the CMO of Hero Gaming, is talking about exactly that. He's drawing comparisons to the wider tech industry with iGaming industry, and to discuss what does the iGaming industry do well, where are we lacking, and a comparison to other industries. So it'll be interesting because I think in our industry we sometimes get the feeling that we're in a little bit of a bubble. We don't have that many. We don't communicate that much with other industries as such. So it will be interesting to hear from a wider perspective on Scott's judgment on our little industry. So Sam, what do you feel? I mean, recently I think that the industry has been faced with many challenges now in the recent years on the compliance and regulatory side, and I think the feeling, at least for me, is that innovation have kind of taken a little bit of a backseat in general. But what do you feel are the most innovative operators and suppliers and in 2020, and why?
Well, I mean, okay, I guess I'm a bit biased, but I think Hero Gaming has certainly led a lot of the way with innovations on the operator side. I mean, we've introduced things like blitz spins, which, for those of you who don't know, is managing to play 100 game rounds in like a minute on a game, and stopping to play the feature rounds. We've recently introduced the ability for customers to buy their way into bonus rounds. Again, this is a sort of habit that we've seen on the supplier side, but wasn't integrated on the operator side. So lots of the supplier side games now, and it goes back, in my mind, it goes back to a lot of what James talked about in his, James from Push, what he talked about in his podcast, which was about this trend of snacking towards content. You have a smaller amount of time to encapsulate and provide entertainment to your customer, and your ability to build products that quickly deliver great experiences, I think, is where a lot of the innovation is happening. On the supplier side, that's happening by allowing players to buy their way straight into bonus rounds. It used to be that you were spinning for anywhere between 100 and 300 spins before you got yourself into this bonus round.
That's so interesting. It's kind of like what loot boxes are in gaming.
Exactly, very similar.
Do you think it is it because of the success of loot boxes that you think this has been implemented?
Well, I think it may be the success of loot box. I think it's more generally, as I say, it's the fact that you've got less time and a high level of competition. So how do you kind of give the player the most valuable experience in the shortest period of time? And that tends to be the excitement of the bonus round. So if you can sell that and the player is prepared to buy it, then what a great way, because then it's just an option. They don't have to buy it. They can still enjoy the game exactly how they used to, but you're giving them this sort of hyper quick way of being able to get sort of cut to the chase, get to what the sort of exciting kind of pinnacle of this game is going to be. So at Hero, we've done that with our brands, but we've done it not only on the games. So on the games where the suppliers provide it, you can of course just buy it, but we've actually worked out a way where you can buy bonus rounds in games that do not sell those bonus rounds. So and Push Gaming is one of those suppliers that we work with on that technology. And again, I admire them for not jumping on the one game a fortnight, one game a month bandwagon that we've seen elsewhere. And instead of going for quantity, they do focus on quality. They do focus on changing the game and making things different. And so they're really fun to work with when we're trying to do these kind of operator and supplier collaborations, as are a number of the other guys on the Relax platform that we do as well work with. So I think I think the use of these type of tools and these innovative games are much more interesting, and there are certain suppliers doing that. We've talked at length on, or I particularly have talked in the past at length about some of the Evolution productions, and I'm very excited about Craps and a few of the other kind of games which I, always hoped would be innovated but never did, and finally we're kind of getting there. So on that side, I think there's a sort of ample amount of innovation, but at the same time there are, for every one innovator in our industry, there are 25 followers, and I think the biggest question for me when you talk about innovation is who should be doing it, and how do we incentivize them properly to do innovation. And that's a real challenge when you've got companies the size of Evolution, and then you've got new startups who are spinning up some sort of local studio, and trying to work on on a very tight budget on someone else's platform. So, and that, that's not to say that they shouldn't all be innovating, but let's say the R&D budgets will be quite different amongst certain sets. So how do we make it worth the while for the big guys to really innovate, rather than have them just following as well?
Yeah, what is the key there? Because obviously the smaller game studios, their pitch would be that their games are cheaper to adopt, obviously, and I mean, and there is a business case to be made by that as well. I mean, the market will go where it makes sense, obviously. So if some operators can choose to save some money, they will choose to do that. If there's another small game studio that perhaps wants to be more innovative, and they have one idea that they go all in on, either that idea works or it doesn't work. Like how do you purposely reward innovation rather than just following business sense?
Yeah, it's tough as to kind of how how we reward it and how we incentivize it. But I think the point is exactly that. Like, if you're a supplier and your only or your key pitch point is price, it's going to be a long road to success. I think that there are lots of small studios who are even more innovative than the big studios. So it's not, I don't think it's the fact that the smaller guys are not trying to innovate, I'm not suggesting that the small guys are followers. I'm suggesting that sometimes if there is a small studio that does innovate, they just don't have the distribution to benefit at max from those type of innovations too early on, and by the time they do, often they've been plagiarized or so it's difficult. How do you at the same time, as an operator, would I ever want a supplier to sign a promise to a new studio to say that if I took his game, I promise not to take anything like it from anyone else? No, and I'm probably not incentivized to do that either. So it's really it's a real chicken and egg question for me. And I think if you do have some brave operators out there who are prepared to sort of take that leap of faith with some of these more innovative studios and say, let's develop something and help you get it to market, then great. But I say that those collaborations haven't happened so much in the past, so I'm not massively positive that they're being lined up for the future just yet either.
No, I mean, it perhaps ties in with the question of consolidation of the industry at large, as we've seen recently, most recently with NetEnt and Evolution, of course. Before that with NetEnt and Red Tiger. I mean, it seems that the industry is heading towards consolidation, both on the operator side and on the supplier side. And perhaps going into the future, it just will be very difficult for new game suppliers, new game studios to have the resources to start anew. Or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think my only advice, let's say, to a small game studio would be focus on something quite specific. Don't try and attack every market and every genre and every math model and high volatility, medium volatility. Focus on something. Find yourself a corner of the market that you can continue to iteratively develop and kind of fight for that, fight for the success of that position. And obviously it takes time. No one hits good games on often not for the first 50 or so. Maybe a lot of titles before you hit it, and until then it's just about surviving and iterating in the right way and not don't lose track of the vision that you had in the first place. If you've got a market or a type of a specific type of product that you want to sort of corner and chase down, keep keep pushing towards that, because I think it'll be ultimately much harder to just be one other generic supplier in a ever growing world of generic suppliers.
Yeah, true. I mean, it was just, I mean, a few years ago, the iGaming industry was so fragmented on the supplier side, particularly, especially on the game studios and game providers. And so I think at that time it was easier to be a small fish, let's say, because there weren't really these giants. There was like a point in the industry where things really changed, because let's say if we go back 10, 15 years, there was only 2 or 3 major game suppliers. There was the Playtech, there was the Microgaming, and there was the NetEnt and so forth. And I remember when I worked at BetSafe and Betson back in like 2011, there was on BetSafe we had Casino Red and we had Casino Black, and Casino Red was NetEnt and Casino Black was Microgaming, and there wasn't any discussions about taking in any other games into the cloud. That was not even a meaningful conversation to have at that point. But it seems that some key employees from NetEnt, they kind of started their own thing, like Frederick started Yggdrasil, for example, and then it was kind of like the floodgates opened all of a sudden, and the market became really fragmented at one point. But now it's consolidating again. Do you have that feeling too?
Yeah, I think there was obviously some really great success stories that spun off from the sort of bigger guys. Now the sort of trend seems to be more around aggregation. So I think that there's a couple of things that will happen. There are some medium-sized and even large-sized suppliers that have been in the game for a while and will be looking to cash out, or have already cashed out, and will consolidate under even bigger. But there is a healthy amount of new suppliers that are coming in, and there are aggregation platforms, Oryx, Relax, Solid out in Asia, and a bunch of platforms out there who are helping to, I believe Yggdrasil as well, or even in this position now, where they are incubating these studios, bringing them to market, providing support with them and distribution for them to go to market. So I still feel that it could go either way. I don't feel like it is in any way getting the variety is definitely not getting smaller again. For me, it's always mushroomed outwards. And I think that it feels certainly like, if we look at the performance and onboarding that aggregators are doing these days, it does feel like there's no end to this trend. I think, having direct integrations, there'll probably be a slow death towards that. I think most operators will look to have a smaller number of aggregated integrations to take the games, rather than having millions and millions of direct integrations, because technically that's very, very challenging to manage in the long term, with all the different wallet integrations, load speeds, upgrades, especially if you run multiple brands, multiple licenses. So yeah, it's I think there'll probably be a little bit of consolidation through the platforms through which games are supplied, but the suppliers themselves, I believe there will still be a good number of those entering in the coming years, and I think that there's still going to be lots of choice for the operators, and even more choice every year.
Yeah, good. Like normal, when we do these things, time rushes completely past us, and there is like we are entering some form of void into the universe where time just runs at a different pace. But I do have one last thing that I would like to ask you today, Sam, which is on the emerging technology in general. So we've seen the rise of VR, we've seen the rise of AR, and whenever there is these new technologies emerging, immediately you see everyone wants to kind of be the innovators, and everyone wants to be the first to adopt these technologies, and that leads to a lot of novelty I think. And I think we saw that in the VR space a couple of years ago at the shows. Everyone was going to have a VR function or the VR casino or whatever. This is like a knee-jerk reaction to these new technologies. And now that hype has kind of passed a bit and the technology kind of settles a little bit. So that is just the example of VR. But do you see any real use in these emerging technologies, VR being one of them, AR being one of them? There could be others as well that I'm not thinking about right now. How do you see these emerging technologies in gaming?
Yeah, well, I think that you just don't. I mean, I don't know anyone who owns a VR headset, right? So if I think, if I think, okay,
Me. Yes, I bought it today.
You stand alone, then.
Yes,
yes.
One person.
So, I mean, you kind of have to start with what's around you, what's in your sort of social group, because I am in the demographic that I'm typically selling to, right? So, that type of technology, I don't see a widespread application for it so much in the gambling space. The one it most naturally would lend itself to would be perhaps the live or kind of a more immersive gaming experience. For me, the type of technologies which I'm interested to see and I think could have some developments are the multi-screen technologies. So the use of being able to cast and connect between multiple devices. So I think that, if you can imagine, being able to control, having the keypad from the slot machine on your phone, but kind of casting it up on the TV. So you get this kind of the big experience of the live casino or the slot, but you don't have to be up in front of the laptop in front, with a HDMI going to the screen. You can just sit there and hit your blackjack hands from your mobile, which is controlling what you see on your screen. So for me, it's those type of conveniences and those type of trends. I mean, we all do it. It's very rare that we are looking at only ever one screen. I personally find it really hard to watch a movie anymore because there's always something else happening on one of your screens somewhere, and that's very very distracting. So you've either got to, I think we have to understand that that's just how people are going to behave going forwards, and if we can take advantage of that and create products which use multiple screens or use the ability for mine and your phone to connect together to enjoy a game of heads up poker or playing blackjack even against one another, or spinning slots like with Henrik and Supernation, having that battle but doing it over the table and connecting, so these I think applications of those type of technologies for me is something that has a more tangible future because everybody has these multiple devices already. We're not relying on a particular piece of hardware in that sense. It's just a better, a more intelligent use of the devices that we have already.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I haven't thought about that. I would say that this is what we are talking about now would be emerging technology in the short term, let's say, because this technology is already there, so to say, in some sense, and it seems to be a very natural next step. I would argue as well that there would be, so this is the short term innovation, and I agree that VR and these things is not there yet. It's not in the short term. Then there are medium term innovation and long term innovation, and I would say that like if we move into like the medium term innovation, like what is like 5 to 10 years away. I think something that would be interesting from my perspective would be on the AR side. Let's say that there will be a piece of technology that will be adopted within the next 5 to 10 years. For example, your glasses, you will have AR functionality in your normal day-to-day glasses. And wouldn't it be really cool if you could go to Old Trafford watching Manchester United, and in your VR glasses, you have statistic popping up, you have options to bet, or you have graphics that that can assist you to make really cool bets as you're watching the game, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that those kind of things, or it doesn't have to be football. I mean, you could essentially you could have technology that could prop bet you almost anything, right? You know, the next guy that walks into the bar is going to be wearing a red jacket. Okay, what are the odds? We've just, you know, your glasses have been picking up the last 45 people who walked into the bar, so they've already computed odds for you, and they've worked out that, you know, the next guy, the odds of the next guy is 8-1. I mean, I don't know yeah, of course. I think that you know, anything like that, anything where it's wearable, or anything where you've got the opportunity to use the environment around you to enhance the experience. I think the other sort of technologies, you know, if we talk about, you know, we saw the popularity of just really basic things like the house party app. And now you see, you know, people doing, you know, TikTok and these are kind of, they're just almost so natural to people. I think that you have to think, what's the next level of engagement of that? I mean, imagine if, you know, it wasn't just a flat TikTok image. You know, you could be in the image and you can somehow encapsulate that. If you think about the world of advertising and how amazing you could make that feel for a gambler, because gamblers are very sensory people, right? So we live on our sensations. We have very heightened sensations towards certain triggers, and to be able to encapsulate those with modern marketing techniques, you know, whether that's sort of entering virtual worlds or somehow bringing senses in, whether they're visual senses or locational senses, whatever that is.
Yeah. I mean, this is very future driven, obviously, and I think what's stopping VR now specifically, and I say it from my own experience, then, because I bought the Oculus the first day it came, because I thought that this is the future. Now, you know, it's time to be like, I want to be a part of this. But something that I noticed very quickly is that and I think this is a feeling in the VR world in general, actually, that as it stands right now, I would make the claim that VR is a novelty. I think that even of the people who own these headsets, including myself, we use them very, very rarely. You know, and it has this the function that it has right now is to show someone this technology who hasn't tried it before. Okay, so anyone who tries VR for the first time is mind blown, you know, and you immediately think that this is the future. But when you actually sit down with it for a while, that novelty feeling disappears. And you know, you play the game for a few times and it's just not something that pulls you back, you know. That's where the technology is right now. But on the other hand, if the technology keeps evolving, and I know that Facebook, that owns Oculus, and the biggest distributor of the headphones, they have released kind of their vision for the future, and that's when you see the real implementation and functionality of this VR set. And that's also when it makes more sense why Facebook bought this tool, because they obviously want to be way ahead of the curve. So when it comes to kind of, you have these glasses on you, and you know, you and me, we can meet each other in this environment, and I will see you as a real person, you will see me as a real person, and that's when the technology can become really interesting, but not as it stands right now, you know.
No, and I think anything that doesn't interact with your usual daily life will usually become a novelty. So you know, the things that tend to stick around are the things that you do without realizing it, and the technologies that support what you do without realizing it, and bring something else, bring a passion or a hobby or something back in line with your everyday life, you know. Real simple things
to support you. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, the really simple thing, you know, paddles become a bit of a craze now. Paddle tennis in Malta, and they've got a brilliant app, this Playtomic app, and you know, you book through it, you can put your results in it, you can share it on social media, you can find out where courts are in different places of the world and book them, and rent your racket. So again, it's just really convenient, really good, convenient technology, and a different way to do something which otherwise you'd have to go online. I'd have to log in somewhere. I'd have to put in my my payments, and if I'm controlling everything through the same central app, it's making it's on my phone. It's just much easier than doing it on my laptop, because I'm always connected to my phone. And again, this is what we need to think about as the sort of for gaming, is how are more of those type of technologies relevant to kind of locating and finding ways to engage players.
Yeah, and I think the smartphone as an innovation would be leading back to the very first question of this podcast, which was what was your favorite innovation? I would say the smartphone is probably, for me, what is the biggest innovation ever. And the reason for that is, I mean, the smartphone is a pure device to that will give you access to all information in the entire world. It's like an extension, and it will alleviate you to access all kind of information in the world, and you can do so many incredible things with it to make your life easier, like you mentioned with the paddle app, for example. And then the question is like, what will be so I think the reason why the smartphone obviously is a part of our life now is that it is literally an extension of ourselves now. It is a part of you, and when we look forward into the future, like now we will end on a futuristic, forward-driven way. But I think Elon Musk said it really interesting. He echoed the same thing, that you have all the information already in you because you have the smartphone. So you are a part of the smartphone, and because you have a smartphone, you have access to all the information in the entire world. But he said there's an interface problem, because when you have a memory, you immediately access that memory, and you don't have to think very much, hopefully, to remember what you want to remember. But when you interact with a phone, you have an interface problem. Your hands have to interact with the thing to get you the information that you need, and it takes some time to get the information that you're looking for. So his way of approaching this is his company Neuralink, which aims.
Yes, I saw. It's crazy.
Yeah. Which aims to remove this, what he calls an interface problem, that will give you access to the entire world instantly by connecting it to your brain, And then what will come out of that, it's not even worth speculating in, I think. No. It's just so far into the future that, or not really that far into the future, but it is so abstract that we can't even understand it yet. But that's when we have to be there, Sam. That's when we have to be
exactly
and understand how this ties into gaming and so forth. So shall we end on that note today?
Yes. Thank you very much. It was an enjoyable discussion.
Yeah, a lot of things to think about, and thank you, Sam. It's honestly it's a long time coming to have you here. It's super interesting to talk to you, and I hope we can do it again soon.
Excellent.
Great, and thank you everyone who listened in today. Thanks to our sponsors, Pragmatic Solutions, and I wish you everyone a beautiful afternoon here in sunny Marbella and from sunny Malta and from all over the world. Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.